All right, hey everyone, welcome to the last day of the BEAMathon. This is our last Landing Internships and Jobs AMA panel, and I'm really excited to introduce our incredible speakers who will be speaking about things from nailing interviews to writing some resumes and just landing internships and jobs and kind of just what they do at these internships in general. So really excited, but before we get into that and everything, we are going to you know the drill. We're going to introduce our first prize opportunity like we do at every panel. So basically what we're going to do is if you want a chance to win some free Beam merchandise like these stickers and stuff, all you have to do is follow Beam Community on Instagram and then post an Instagram story, maybe a picture of you at the workshop or during the workshop, anytime before 4:50 p.m. Eastern time when this workshop ends, and just tag Beam Community and you can get a chance to win. And I think I picked pretty much everyone who won last time. So pretty much everyone who entered won. So honestly, just shoot your shot. You never know what can happen. And yeah, if you want to have like more of these prizes, have more of a chance to win, just attend our closing ceremony later on and you can see some prize throwing like this. I don't know why I'm doing that, but I'm gonna end up cleaning a lot tonight. But yeah, so let's get straight into introducing our speakers. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go down the line and call on each of our speakers. And basically what you guys can do is just unmute your mic and introduce yourself and where you currently work at or where you formerly or you're going to work at in terms of internship or job, maybe some fun facts about you and what you're excited for today. So Chelsea, feel free to unmute your mic and introduce yourself. Let's see, I don't know if it's working. There we go.
All right, are you hearing me? I'm trying to unmute. I'm like, okay, you're here. Okay, you're seeing me too. Great.
Oh yeah, I see. I love the background.
Yeah. So hey everyone, I am Chelsea. Right. I'm a junior at Kettering University, studying industrial engineering. I am interning two places. So I actually will be interning at Microsoft in the summer, and then so it's not MBCU. I'll be interning at Microsoft in the summer as a program manager intern, and I am interning at HP, so Hewlett Packard, as a supply chain intern in the spring. Well, right now until the spring. I like a jack of many trades. I am a YouTuber and I post college content and like how to find scholarships and like internships and all that lovely stuff. And my YouTube is Chelsea K. Wright. I'm an entrepreneur. I have my own college planner for college students, and I'm a feminist. And I have a nonprofit back home in Jamaica that strives to raise awareness about the sexual and reproductive health and rights of adolescents. And we are called Girls Who Know Jamaica. Overall, I love people, love technology, because I believe that that is our way forward, but we can only use it for good because it has so much like potential for, bad. And yeah, connect with me, guys. I would love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. Very excited to speak with you. And Shivali, feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Shivali, and I'm a high school senior from the Bay Area. This past summer, I interned at Verizon through my high school's NAF Academy program that I've been a part of for 3 years. But now I'm interning at the Trill Project, which is an app that focuses on mental health and just self-awareness that I highly recommend downloading. And when I'm not interning, I run a nonprofit called Girl Genius, which is basically empowering women in STEAM. We do a lot of really cool social media content. So if that piques your interest, be sure to follow us on Instagram. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We love Shivali in our Beam community too. And Justin, feel free to unmute your mic and introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Justin. It's great to be here. And shout out to the entire Beam team. Like, this is incredible. I was going through the Slack workspace and everything. Very, very impressive. But I am currently a junior at Columbia University. I'm studying biomedical engineering and computer science. As you can see, this past summer, I was doing venture capital at Prefix Capital. I'm working as an analyst there and a scout during the year. My next position is still like a TBD in the process as of right now. But I've kind of worked at startups, worked at smaller companies, worked at venture capital firms. I guess my fun fact would be my first internship out of high school was at a stand-up comedy club, doing podcast engineering and development for them. That is also while I was building my own podcast to interview early stage entrepreneurs. So I've kind of touched very different things. Then outside of kind of the work in academic, I'm also the president of the Columbia Organization of Rising Entrepreneurs, one of the largest pre-professional societies at Columbia, and kind of I would say the most important startup organization. But we do a lot of high school programming. We run an accelerator for startups in the Columbia community and do a lot of different programming there. So happy to be here and hopefully could provide some help with the entire internship and job thing. Also, I'm very open, so I'll put my email in the chat afterwards and my LinkedIn as well. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah, thank you so much for introducing yourself. Very excited to speak with you later today at this panel. And last but not least, Mary, feel free to unmute your mic and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm Mary. I'm a freshman at the University of Pennsylvania, probably going to study a double major in econ and computer science, but I might also pursue a minor in cinema studies or data science. Not entirely sure yet. But I interned at Capri for Girls, which is a financial education app that just launched its beta, I believe, in December 2020. Last summer, I'm now an intern at SafeStamp, which is a nanotechnology startup that's fighting against counterfeit among the pharmaceutical industry. And it was actually originally a summer intern offer, but has now transitioned to a spring intern offer. So I'm currently working there for the spring and summer. At Penn, I'm in Women in Computer Science. I'm also in Global Research and Consulting, which is like a consulting and insights club. So things that are about data analysis, bringing actionable insights. I'm pretty well versed in that. And yeah, I also run an LLC with 4 other people for college consulting and advising called InReach Prep. And we do provide free services for those who identify as first generation low income. And I will go ahead and drop my LinkedIn and my personal email and the InReach email in the chat at the end of this session.
Awesome. Thank you guys for introducing yourselves. And I'm really excited to get started with the actual AMAs. So I'm going to unshare my screen, just go over a few things. So basically how this is going to work is within the chat, if anyone has any questions related to anything about the internship and job process, whether it be actually landing those internships and jobs or during the actual process of working at those companies, or maybe nailing interviews or writing your resumes, feel free to leave them in the chat. But we also do have some pre-written questions from our Beam Slack that I'm actually going to start to ask. But basically what's going to happen is for the speakers, if you guys have an answer to a question, all you have to do is just go into the Zoom and just raise your hand virtually in the Zoom, and I'll just leave the floor to anyone who wants to answer that question. So I'm going to start off with something from our Beam Slack, but of course feel free to, you can either raise your hand if you have a question or want to leave it in the chat. The first one is, what advice do you guys have for nailing an interview? So I know in a lot of internships, stuff like that, there's an interview process for a ton of different companies. So have you guys done any interviews, and do you guys have any advice from whether it's calming your nerves before interviews, or maybe even during, or maybe just preparing questions to ask the interviewer, or just overall the content? So feel free speakers to raise your hand in the Zoom if you have any tips or advice for nailing those interviews in that process and stuff like that. So does anyone want to give their take on that for the interview process, or we can go along with, oh, cool. Cool. Yeah, Chelsea, feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, so I love this question because I remember interviewing for both of my roles and I was such a mess. I was so nervous. But the things that I used were to really research, know your company, know your why for the company, and know the role that you're going to, that you're interviewing for. So for example, if you want to be you're interning for a software engineer position, interviewing for a software engineering position, you want to ensure that you're you are very strong with code, that you've been practicing your lead code, you're on Code Academy, like practicing and stuff like that. But you want to ensure that you also have your behavioral questions down as well. For example, my interview was pretty behavioral based. So they asked me like a lot of questions that required me to use like the STAR method. I'm not sure how many of you guys know the STAR method, but like, I think it's situation, the task, your action. I don't remember. Somebody else can like speak on that, but like the STAR method was really something that helped me to prepare my answers to questions like that. And like I practiced. So I did mock interviews. And I think there was this website called Pramp that I did mock interviews on with like random people. So they interviewed me and then I in turn interviewed them. And that really, really helped me a lot because I was talking to strangers. So the anxiety was still there. But it was just not like a stranger from the company. So yeah, to wrap this all up, I would say know your company, know your why for the company, because one of my first questions was like, why Microsoft? Why HP? Why do you want to work here? So your why, ask about what kind of interview it is, whether it's a technical or behavioral interview, so that you can like practice in advance. And then like my last tip is just practice, because practice makes perfect. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your take on that. I think that's really important to keep in mind before preparing for interviews. And Justin, feel free to give your advice on that too.
Sure. I mean, I think Chelsea's advice is like very, very on the point. The only thing I would add is being able to connect your background and experiences on your resume to the specific role, I think is really important. This is something early on that I didn't exactly like think about too much, but in addition to the why of why you're applying, showing that in your past experiences, you've done things that either match up with the role or have transferable skill sets is really, really valuable. I also think one of the cool things, and this of course depends on the interview, but sometimes it's important at the beginning of an interview kind of just to take a breath and try to build a rapport with your interviewer. So this could be doing a bit of research beforehand and hearing, kind of finding out about their background and maybe asking questions about that, looking at interests or what they work on in the specific company. Kind of changes if they're a recruiter, but if you're talking to someone else in the company, it always helps. And just being interested in that person generally has a solid effect, and you get to really connect with them as you go into the question. So building that connection is always very useful. I would also say that if you were to go online and look for different Slack communities or Reddit channels about whatever you are interviewing, an example of this is there's a Slack community called Product Buds that I'm actually a part of. And the focus of the community is in product management, product design, all those sorts of areas. And you go on this channel. One, there's a really large job board, which is always great. And two, you have a huge network of other students doing the very similar search. So they're always open to connecting to do mock interviews or think about jobs in kind of the same sense. So I think finding communities is always very, very helpful because generally people are pretty collaborative with it. I would also lastly add that understanding, I've like interned with startups and kind of in the startup space, and understanding the founding story is always kind of a plus. When you can talk about how the company came to be, insights into the culture of what's happening, that sort of thing, that's always pretty impressive when you're talking to an interviewer. So some of the small things go a long way in that sense.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that really valuable information. We'll definitely be keeping that in mind. And Mary, feel free to give your advice on that as well.
Yeah, so I also have quite a bit of experience in the startup space. Capri was a pre-seed startup. SafeStamp is a startup that I believe they're doing like some sort of like special round of funding. But I feel like it's best if I cater my advice according to whatever people are most interested in. So if you have a specific industry that you're interested in, go ahead and drop it in the chat so I can maybe provide advice, because I don't want to like provide advice for an industry that no one's interested in. Okay, business, finance, education. Education in terms of like teaching or like ed tech or think tank teaching. Okay. Engineering. Okay. Yeah. So healthcare. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. Wow, I love I love it when high schoolers are, like already know what they're passionate about. Because I had no idea what I wanted to do, like going into college. I'm still not sure what I want to do, which is why I just have a bunch of random knowledge about stuff. But so adding to the STAR method, it's really important for you to create a story out of your resume, like really have that like narrative going for you, talking about how certain experiences have fed into other experiences. And also if you have a certain brand, and I think this is more in line with what design students do, but if you have a specific brand image that you have, whether it be a logo or how you design your resume, that can be really helpful into the interview process because it makes you more memorable. I will add, so looking at what Selena said about business and finance, finance in particular, I would say like investment banking, they have very niche questions that are like mathematical, and you kind of have to prepare for those before you even start actively applying and recruiting for investment banking. So there are questions like, I have 84 blocks, but one is faulty. How many minimum weighings do I have to do? And you sort of have to know that problem solving strategy before you go into those interviews. But I would say that high schoolers should not be worried about that, because I would say that most college clubs or just you recruiting in college should prepare you quite well for those. And I would also say, like, adding on to Justin's point about really connecting with your interviewer, my SafeStamp interview was one of the most interesting experiences I've ever had, because I mentioned I was interested in Russian literature. And keep in mind, this is like a nanotech startup, so it's very STEM based. I mentioned I liked Russian literature, and then we talked for like 15 to 20 minutes about Crime and Punishment. It was the weirdest experience I ever had, because I had no idea that he liked Russian literature too, but that happened. And then he just kind of decided like, oh, like I really like you, I'll just give you an offer like right after our interview. And that was a really interesting time for me, because I just was genuine and just talked about what I liked. And it happened to resonate really well with the interviewer. I'm not going to say that that works every single time. I would say that the thing that happened to me was somewhat of a miracle, but if you are genuine and you're really passionate about what you're interested in, the interviewer will see it and they'll like remember you, because they'll probably remember you as like, oh, like it's that girl that really likes playing Tetris. Like she plays competitive Tetris. So that's something I want to throw out there. In terms of like engineering, comp sci, having those projects are really, really important before you get those internships. You can have an internship before having any projects and sort of use that internship as your project as proof of what you know. But I would say that the best way to demonstrate your abilities is by having your own project, preferably in something that you're really passionate about. So say that you're interested in music, you can use Spotify's API and create a project out of that and sort of tie in all of your personal interests with your technical skills together to the recruiter and say, hi, I'm interested in this. I'm sorry for some things like education and healthcare. I have not interviewed for those, so I'm not sure how to advise on that, but that's sort of like more niche areas of like what to be aware of. So yeah.
Thank you so much for the advice. I really loved all the tips that you gave for every one of those fields. And Shivali, feel free to give your take on that too.
Yeah, so everyone said really, really great things, and I agree with everything, especially Justin's point on the founding story. That is single-handedly how I got my first internship at like a really small company ran by a lot of college students, because I connected with the founding story and I mentioned it. But beyond those things, I would say that if you are someone who hasn't necessarily interviewed a lot and you're really nervous about it, something that really helped me was literally making like a Google document and writing out answers to things like, tell me about yourself. What is your greatest strength and weakness? Tell me about an obstacle you've overcome. Because these questions, they do not go away. They are there in every interview and you have to know how to answer them. And so writing it down and not looking at it for a few days allowed me to pinpoint where I'm not actually answering part of the question, where I can actually improve it. And it also just allowed me to get more comfortable in answering those things on the spot. Also, something I will say for virtual interviews that really helped me was just having my screen split, one side with my resume and notes for the interview, and then the other side with my actual Zoom. That just really allowed me to remember like, oh yeah, this is on my resume. Let me mention it right now. But yeah, that's what I would say for interviews. Don't be nervous. They're honestly okay, and you will be fine.
Yeah, thank you so much for those amazing tips. I actually like use that strategy too. Like I didn't know that other people use it where like you actually type out the questions and then just either practice it beforehand. Like that's kind of the method I do. Like for college interviews, like I've done things where like I predicted what questions they're going to ask and then kind of just read them aloud to myself and practice them like a lecture in front of my dog or something just to kind of go over it. But yeah, so let's go into the next question, and it's from Selena, and she's asking, where do you guys find these internships or opportunities besides LinkedIn or Indeed? Or it can be LinkedIn and Indeed. So like, do you guys have any other recommendations for community platforms? I know Justin, I think, went over one of the platforms in terms of communities and Slacks and like Reddit channels, but do you guys have any other recommendations of where to actually find internships? And Mary, feel free to give your take on that.
Yeah, so I found my Capri internship through Built by Girls because someone just messaged it in one of the channels, and I just applied directly just through the, I forgot what it was, but it was like through a form website, and then I got reached out by the like person who was hiring and did that. Yeah, so Product Buds is really great, Gen Z VCs. Just in general, I believe that there's a Twitter account for venture capital that tends to send out some stuff, and there's a lot of venture capital effort to really expand into college students so that they could get venture capital experience early on. I would say that Ladder is a pretty good one in terms of just knowing people, because people tend to send out a lot of opportunities there. So that's my referral link. Join Ladder if you want. But I think Ladder is really helpful. I think just also through LinkedIn, just looking at other people's profiles and seeing where they've interned can just really help in sparking that conversation with them and saying, hey, like I noticed that you did this last summer. Can you tell me about what you did there? And if like you have any tips for recruiting? Because I would argue that sometimes some of the best ways you can get internships is not through like formally applying through your website. It's by actually just talking to people and then them remembering you and then letting you know like, hey, there's this like amazing opportunity. And like, I want you to take part of it. Like actually really funny story. Luis, who's like the HR person at Ladder, he actually went to my high school. I never talked to him in high school because he was 3 years older than me. He went to a different university from me, but he remembered me on Discord because I reached out to him before and said, hey, can you look at my resume for me? Because I know that you're friends with some of my other friends. And he remembered me there. And then when he was working on Ladder, he messaged me saying, hey, like, do you want to be Ladder campus manager? And he was telling me about all these amazing opportunities I could have done at Ladder. And I had to turn him down because I had a lot of other projects onboarded for this semester. But that's just a really good story about how just knowing people and really making yourself memorable to them can just help you get offers that aren't publicly available, like online. So yeah, kind of took that in a different direction, but I did want to emphasize the importance of networking and just knowing people.
Yeah, for sure. I think networking is a really great strategy for getting internships. And Chelsea, feel free to unmute and give your advice on that too.
Yeah, so I loved everything that Mary said. I'm dropping like a few other like places that I've found like internships from. So like Jobwell, Hello, Handshake. I actually found I think it was my HP internship through Handshake. It was like a career fair that was happening. And I just spoke to one of the representatives that were there. And I was just speaking about, just like literally introducing myself, learning more about the company, and just like we were just having a conversation. And I was telling her about like how my school is set up. And then she was just like, oh, we have like a position open in like the spring. And since your school is, such and such, would you like to interview? So going back to what Mary said in terms of like your network and just like really connecting with people, do not discount like what that can do for you. So I would not count out LinkedIn and like reaching out to people, because you want to have your network before you actually need it, so while these other things are here, don't discount like using LinkedIn and building your network.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely agree with that point as well. And Justin, feel free to give your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think these have been such great points. When it comes to using LinkedIn, I think one, LinkedIn is obviously like a really powerful resource here, but I think something that always confused me is how to go about having a lot of those coffee chat conversations and when to have the ask. I was always confused because people would be like, reach out on LinkedIn, have these coffee chats, connect to recruiters, all these sorts of things. And I'm like, should I start off the conversation asking for a job? Like, when should that happen? And I've kind of found through experience that going to LinkedIn, going through the search and looking at people who could be alums from your high school, could be alums from or current students at the college you'll be going to, or if you just have some affiliation in terms of organization or whatever else you're doing, sorting for that is really pivotal. Reaching out to them and then just being genuinely interested in what it is that they're doing, how they got to where they are, their background, asking for advice, having just a genuine conversation that doesn't seem transactional or come with a clear ask goes a really far way into whether it's finding a mentor or growing your network. And then like the key here, I think, is after the conversation, one, sending that follow-up email, and in the follow-up email, just kind of thanking them for their time, maybe attaching a resume. And then if you also apply to something at their company, just mentioning that. I have seen that go a far way in getting that referral or getting kind of an advocate at the company, because doing the hard cold application on a LinkedIn or Indeed or whatnot is pretty difficult. So having those contacts are always helpful. I also think that just promoting side projects on different platforms is really helpful. So if it is a nonprofit you're working on, if it is a project, whether technical or an account or a blog or art, whatever it may be, using your Twitter, your Instagram, your LinkedIn, your Facebook to talk about the projects sometimes gets kind of organic reach for what's happening. I know one of my initial connections came through someone looking at my podcast and kind of getting connected through that. So kind of putting yourself out there goes a far way. And my last advice would be fellowships. There are a ton of fellowships. I also believe for like going, I know there's some for freshmen, sophomore in college, but going high school seniors, there should be a lot out there. I will drop one called the MLT. It's a leadership fellowship that has a bunch of resources for people kind of going into college and starting out in a plethora of different computer engineering, finance, or software engineering, a bunch of different places. So looking for fellowships and trying to get connected to that through there usually provides a solid network and pipeline for internships. So some things to consider.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that amazing advice. I definitely think it's important to put yourself out there and gain more exposure on LinkedIn so more people can be familiar with your profile. And then thanks for those amazing resources. And Shivali, feel free to give your advice on that as well.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone has said, especially about leveraging any personal connections you have. For example, in December of 2019, I had secured my research internship that I was going to do before COVID. And then in March, it got canceled because of the pandemic. And I was feeling really, really overwhelmed because I spent 6 months trying to get this internship. But what I did was I reached out to someone I knew who had research experience. She had done a takeover on my nonprofit's Instagram account. And I asked her, I explained my situation. I was like, do you know any internships that are available? And she sent me the link to apply to that internship. And I ended up interning at ASU for around 3 weeks in May. And so definitely leverage any personal connections you have, even if it's just someone you see online. Like most people want to help. So I highly recommend just networking and doing those coffee chats. But also if you are in high school, I highly recommend not underestimating the power of cold emailing. There aren't a lot of high school actual like applications that you can apply to. And so for me, what I found is really just cold emailing a lot of smaller nonprofits and organizations that, number one, align with your values, but also you see something that you could work on, really allows them to go there and do work. I've noticed that for a lot of the organizations that I have cold emailed, they've given me more work. And so I've actually been able to learn more during those opportunities in comparison to the structured high school internship programs. So highly recommend cold emailing.
Yeah, definitely agree. Thank you so much for that amazing advice. And Justin, if you want to add on to your last point as well.
Yeah, I just think that's a great point. The other thing that took me a second to understand, especially coming out of high school, is that internships are supposed to be learning opportunities. Like the point is to actually grow a lot while you're doing internships. So you shouldn't feel like you have to have all the skills and all the background before applying. I really would encourage people to just like shoot your shot, show that you're enthusiastic about something, show that you're passionate and willing to learn, and that could go a long way. Because the point really is learning and it's not like a job that you're applying to. So just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for adding on with those amazing points. So we can go to the next question. And someone's asking, what's your strategy in picking internships or jobs that will build your resume? So for this particular question, maybe it could just be about, building your skills. Like, how do you know what internships and jobs to apply for that will help build your experiences in a certain field? Like, or it could be kind of like the company that you work at right now, or that you used to intern or work at. Like, what's your kind of thought process when deciding which companies to reach out to or which companies to work at and stuff like that? Like, how do you know if a company is like a good fit essentially for your skill set and experiences? So does anyone want to give their take on that, as opposed to like which company to work at, like which is the best fit and stuff like that? Or we can move on to the next question. Oh, perfect.
I can probably go because I was definitely in this sort of rut early on in freshman year, because I was thinking, oh, like I should probably try and get like an internship at some big company if I can, like through like their specialized freshman internships. That I think is not the healthiest mindset to like approach recruiting for internships. Like if you do get an internship at a large company, good for you. Like you definitely have that like prestige, but at the same time, there are plenty of smaller companies or local businesses or nonprofits that can give you invaluable experience. So for me, I don't view internships as a resume builder. I view them as a time to explore different industries and figure out what I actually want to do. Because part of the reason why I joined SafeStamp is because I had no idea what anti-counterfeit technology was. Like I wasn't really a super STEMmy like chemistry or bio person, but I wanted to learn about the industry and see how my skills could bring value to this company. And that's how I sort of approached the interview process. Like I just told them, I'm interested because I think that what you're doing is really high impact, and I want to bring the current existing skills I have to your industry. And I think that's one of the best ways that you can frame it. In terms of like finding specific internships, really take some time to reflect on yourself, really gauge what kind of strengths you have and what kind of weaknesses you have, and really play on your strengths a lot whenever you're applying. There's actually this really popular like behavioral question that's like, what's your greatest strength? What's your greatest weakness? Usually when they're asking what's your greatest weakness, they're not actually asking for a weakness. They're asking for you to acknowledge that like some sort of weakness you have, but you're supposed to spin it to a more positive note at the very end to say how you're either improving or how you feel like even that weakness can benefit you. So that's like sort of one thing to just say. I know I'm like saying a bunch of random stuff, but TLDR, basically, don't view your internships as a resume builder. Really figure out the value that you can bring to the company, what the value the company can bring to you, and figure out some end goal that you have at the very end of the internships. That's basically what I will say.
Thank you so much for those points. I think that's really great when determining whether or not a company is a fit for interning at it. And yeah, Chelsea, feel free to give your take on that too.
Yeah, so I love this question because I feel like I struggled with this a bit during like my college career. I mean, like I'm a junior now, I'm still figuring it out, but I feel like college is such a great time to explore, right? So I would say one of the things that I did was explore whatever interests I had. For example, my first internship was at like a small company in automotive manufacturing. And I hated it so much. Like, I'm an industrial engineer. So they're like, oh, you should wear like the reflective vest and the steel toe boots, and like you should be on the floor. And I hated it completely. I was like, no, this is not for me. So I wouldn't have known that if I didn't, explore that first. And like I felt I had an interest in it, but I soon figured that, I soon realized that this wasn't for me. So that was one thing I could cross off my list. And then secondly, I thought I was interested in like data analytics. And then like I interviewed at Facebook, and I hated every minute of like, what they were asking me to do. So I knew that, analytics wasn't for me. So, you want to like, don't get too caught up on like how it looks on your resume. You want to actually pursue things that are interesting to you. Because at the end of the day, it's your career, and you want to do something that you're actually like passionate about. I guess the next thing that I would say in relation to this question is research the company. I made a YouTube video on this, like rambling about how the reason why I chose Microsoft was because it aligned with my passions. I'm really big on like using tech for social good, even though I don't really love like the coding aspect of tech. I love the possibility and like the power it holds. And that was something that I was able to use when speaking to different representatives of like the company. So reflect on like your values and what is important to you, and look at what companies align with those values, because at the end of the day, it's your life. You want to be happy doing something that you love and working at a place that's like a right fit for you. So where people align, or people or the company itself like has values that are similar to your values. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your insights. Definitely amazing points you shared. And Justin, feel free to give your take on that too.
Yeah, I mean, everything that's been said really resonates with me. I think that introspection is extremely crucial. And when I think of introspection, I think it boils down to a couple of things. It's one, figuring out where you want to be, say your first job out of college or 5-6 years down the line, and then then once you have that end goal, then looking at like the different quadrants, right? So what comes to mind for me is one, people. Can I work for someone who has a job title or who has done things that I admire, that inspire me, that I would want to achieve? And can I like replicate that career or learn from that person? That's always one thing. And then I also think when it comes to people, like what is the sort of culture I would want to work in? Who are the people I want to be spending time with and working together on? You can learn a lot about yourself doing that kind of process. I then think the second quadrant comes from work for some sort of problem, idea, or goal. So if you are someone like me, very passionate about healthcare and creating health solutions for people who are largely underserved, especially with different like marginalized communities and that sort of thing. This is something I care about. And this idea led to me working at a computational drug design startup that was working on very similar things. So if there are questions you have or large scale things that resonate with yourself, could be education and equities or these large scale ideas, using that and picking a company based on that sort of thing. And then think the third possible quadrant could be industry. If you're someone who knows they really want to get into like driverless cars, or they really wanted to get into a certain type of specific community or industry, being able to look for startups or companies in that sector is generally pretty helpful. And then you can chart your way that way. And then the fourth quadrant, I think, is working for skill set. This is kind of interesting because I think internships are amazing ways to really explore different spaces. But if your end goal is to have like be a cybersecurity engineer, that sort of thing, and there are skills that you would need, being able to look at an opportunity in terms of what you would be able to practice while doing it is very helpful. So that kind of 4-prong approach to introspection personally has helped me. I also think that, as people have mentioned, that there is no such thing as like a bad internship. Like I think you gain, whether it's amazing, whether it's awful, you learn a lot about yourself, a lot about what you care about, and in the end, it'll always be quite beneficial in that sense. So definitely, like it sounds like there's a lot of information here, and there's a lot of risk and whatnot, but generally, kind of exploring your path works out in the end. I also just want to say that startups are great, I think, first internships or kind of initial career goal internships, because they give you a ton of responsibilities, and you can really find several different areas of businesses, how exactly they work. So I remember one of the startups I was working at, I was doing like business development and corporate development and a bit of sales in the time that I was with them. So you really get to sample a lot of different things if you're working in startups as compared to larger corporate jobs. So that's kind of like my mini rant about that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really love the approach that you explained. And Mary said, yeah, you also wear lots of hats when working at startups and stuff like that. So I guess we can end up with one last question, just kind of like generalized question, since a lot of people here are high school students. So what, like if you could give any one piece of advice to high school students applying to internships right now, whether it be about how to network or just like finding communities in the fields that you're interested in, or just kind of advice about actually balancing your internship with academics and stuff, what's like something that people must know when entering the career of their choice in terms like of getting that firsthand experience with internships and jobs and stuff like that? So feel free to give your take on that for any of the speakers. If you have like any one piece of advice you would give, kind of just come like an overview of like your your summary of like networking or stuff like that, interviews, just any one piece of advice I'd say, or maybe like any communities you'd recommend, just like as a last thing, or we can go back to with another question if not. Okay, perfect. So Chelsea, feel free to give your take on that.
Yeah, so advice I would give is that it's a learning experience. I think Justin was the one who mentioned this, and I cannot say it enough. Like, no internship is about internship. Go in with like a growth mindset. You're not going to know every single thing because everything is constantly evolving. But once you have the growth mindset and you believe that you can learn anything because you can, just saying that you can, then you're setting up yourself for real success. Another thing that I would say, which is something that I'm constantly learning every day, is that, you're against yourself. Like, you're competing with your, like, the past version of yourself. Like, that's the only person you're in competition with. And I say this because a lot of the time, or like I'm seeing it with like my like classmates now and like different friends and like acquaintances, is that you kind of get caught up in what's happening around you with like internships, and like everyone wants to work at the Google or the Apple, when in and of itself that might not be the best fit for everyone. Like, only certain type of people will actually thrive and like will fit there in terms of values and stuff like that. So bear that in mind, that you're in competition with yourself, and at the end of the day, it's your life, it's your happiness that matters. And yeah, so yeah, I think that is it. That's my little TED talk. I had to just say that.
Yeah, I love the TED Talk. Thank you so much for giving those amazing points. And Mary, feel free to take it away with some advice.
Yeah, so I've already put this in the chat, but like, if you get rejected from an internship as a high schooler, really not the end of the world. Like, 110%. Like, I spent most of high school studying and trying to get good grades and trying to like not mentally implode. Like, I'm just being frank. Like, high school for me was really rough. Like, the last thing I thought about was internships because I didn't think I was capable of it. Like, I don't even think I knew what networking or coffee chats were. So the fact that everyone here is even remotely thinking about internships or thinking about professional development is really admirable. And I applaud you all for having passions and having interests, because I really didn't have that in high school. But I will emphasize, not getting an internship is not the end of the world. Like, it's not an indicator of like how unqualified you are. Sometimes it's just that they're just looking for college students. And even when you're in college, like, they'll tell you like you're not a good culture fit. And that's really how it goes. And I will say that rejection is redirection. I'm gonna like say that thousands of times. But usually when you get rejected, there's probably a reason as to why. And sometimes it's because the recruiters just like don't care about you, and that's just sort of their fault, and it's because they have other worries, they have other resources that they don't have the time to look at your resume, and that's totally fine. And if that, like, if internships don't work out, just do personal projects. Like, I actually think there's like this one LinkedIn post, I think from Jonathan Javier, about his sister who did like a marketing presentation / project for companies. And that's how she was able to get her foot in the door for a lot of different things. Yeah, consulting is huge on LinkedIn. So yeah, but like stuff like that really indicates how showing your personal passion and drive can be more impressive to recruiters than having previous internship experiences. So that's what I'll say about high schoolers applying internships, is basically rejection is redirection, and that if things don't work out with internships, just do a personal project, really show your passion. And sometimes I would say that's better than getting an internship because you have much more freedom in what you want to do. So yeah. Also TechPod is really helpful. Also Built by Girls. I feel like Built by Girls is pretty good for like younger high schoolers who are like sophomores and juniors, and they have a ton of opportunities there all the time. So really consider your resources rather than blindly applying.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely agree with those points. Everything happens for a reason. So don't be afraid to maybe even start your own passion project if you don't end up with an internship. And Shivali, feel free to give your pieces of advice as well.
I feel like as a high schooler, I feel personally obligated to say this, but like internships do not necessarily mean that you're like automatically going to guarantee get into like a good college. Like you should not be interning for that reason. Internships can be a lot of work and they can take up a lot of time. And I think if anything COVID has taught me, and it's that you are never going to get those years back. So if you really don't want to intern somewhere and you're just doing it for the wrong reasons, it's not going to help you at all. Really, it's not. And I would honestly advocate, again, like Mary said, that working on side projects is, in my opinion, in high school, sometimes even more important in towards getting those internships in college, and just helpful for you to identify where you want to go. A lot of my interviews that have gone really well have been because they've been familiar with my work that I've done on my nonprofit or just other organizations. They know what my work looks like, and I haven't even necessarily talked to them about it. And so I think that that really shows that like you don't necessarily need to get this quote unquote professional experience in order to be gaining this skill set, and that working on skills that you really want to work on, like Figma or Google Analytics, or even just designing a newsletter or MailChimp, those types of things, they do accumulate and they do help you over time. Like a fun fact is that my first internship required me to use WordPress, and I made websites on WordPress for fun during like the 4th and 5th grade. So I knew how to use this dashboard like the back of my hand like 5 years later. And so those little skills that you want to learn, they do help you. And I just highly recommend investing your time in those and not necessarily being worried about if you don't have an internship, even leaving high school.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with those points. And last but not least, Justin, feel free to give your advice as well.
Of course, yeah. I mean, everything said, definitely like just plus winning. I think the whole knowing why you're applying to an internship is always helpful. You shouldn't feel compelled because you think a lot of other people are doing it, or it's just what you're supposed to do at that time in like your matriculation. Especially in high school, like just like sometimes you can just kind of take a breath, work on side projects, try to learn things, like go on a Udemy or Coursera or Skillshare, all the websites out there that you could really pick up additional skill sets and knowledge. Sometimes doing those sorts of things are more helpful than trying to go through the entire internship hunt and all of that. I would say the second thing is that like time of high school, like almost going to college, I would really, really emphasize you just reach out to people. Generally, people are very open to responding to you, even if it's a question, if it's a short conversation, jumping on a brief call with someone, shooting those shots go a very, very long way. So reaching out to people definitely should be up there. And then just third, because I saw in the chat someone was asking about questions to ask like the interviewer when they ask you if you have any questions. And I think like one to my earlier point of just getting to know your interviewer, asking about like what their journey was to their job or to the company is really important. Asking them if they had a misconception about the company going into it that has been proven wrong, or like has their idea of the company changed once they've actually started working for them. Asking them about any projects that they've worked on that have been really rewarding for them. Asking about the company culture is always a great one. And then lastly, I always think it's useful to ask the interviewer what an ideal candidate looks like for the role, or for the role, like what would someone who goes above and beyond look like, that sort of thing. Getting those context points are generally pretty useful, and they also are rather impressive on the other side that these are the things that you're thinking about. So some quick notes there.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for those amazing points. And thank you for all the speakers for presenting your amazing advice about the questions related to landing internships and jobs. So can we give a huge thank you to all the speakers in the chat? Give some hype and stuff like that. Everyone, give a huge hype to the speakers. Yes, we love it. Yeah, I think those were really amazing points, and the speakers can drop their social media handles and emails or LinkedIn's if you guys want to connect with some people later on after this workshop and stuff like that. But before we end off and introduce our social media competition winners, we're just going to take a few pictures and just like a quick video that we can feature on the Beam community Instagram. So turn on those cameras, everyone. Come on, guys. I know it's a Sunday afternoon and stuff and stuff like that, but come on, we need it. What happens? Yes. Oh my god, with the iconic background. I keep on forgetting what the background is from. What is it from? Is it Detective Conan? Am I getting it right?
You got it.
I got it right. I didn't have memory loss this time. Okay, more people, come on, not just one person. Okay, Selena, you know what, we're giving you some stickers. send me your address after this. We'll give you some free Beam stickers for being the trooper for that. Come on, guys. If not, we could just, you know what, I would just pull an Adobe Photoshop on this from past photos. Just kidding. Okay, you know what, it's all right. It's a small tight knit photo right here. Cute. Okay, so what we can do, well, let's just do our basic pose, I guess. You want to do the K-pop heart? It's not called the BTS heart, right? It's just the K-pop heart?
Yeah, it's a K-pop heart.
Okay. I guess if people know what we're talking about, just do the K-pop heart, guys. All right, guys, ready? 3, 2, 1. Hey, okay. Why don't we just all do some peace signs? Okay. 3, 2, 1. Nice. All right, so we're just going to announce our social media winners very quickly and then end off this Zoom. So can we get a drum roll, please? Oh, someone was doing it. I heard y'all. Thank you. Okay, 3, 2, 1, and congratulations to these people for winning Beam stickers. I'll contact you after the Beamathon ends to send you guys your prizes and stuff like that. So before we end off, just play some music for a little bit. Okay. Alrighty. Thank you guys for coming, and I'll see you guys at the next workshop. See ya.
Thanks for the invite, guys.
Thank you for speaking. See ya. Bye. Okay, I'm gonna end this.